Fiji's creative industry is growing faster than ever, but behind every powerful image and cinematic story is someone willing to sacrifice sleep, comfort, and certainty to chase a dream. For the season finale of Young Entrepreneurs, we meet a storyteller whose journey began with curiosity, a second-hand opportunity, and YouTube tutorials on a Windows XP computer. From editing rugby highlights for $40 a video to directing international football broadcasts across the Pacific, Daniel Veitata built Lighthouse cinema one lesson at a time. Tonight, we dive into the journey of a young creative who turned passion into purpose.
Right, so my name is Daniel Veitata. I'm from Kandavu, and my mom is Chinese and my dad's from Kandavu. But unfortunately, I do not know how to speak Itoke yet, so I'm still learning. And the business I do is that I run a production house called Lighthouse Cinema, and we specialize in documentaries, filmmaking, and also photography. And I started my journey in photography 12 years ago, back in 2014. So I once attended a 6-week internship, and one of the girls there had a DSLR camera, and I always was intrigued about photos and why some look good or some look bad, and there were different cameras like point and shoot cameras and DSLR cameras. So that really piqued my interest, and I had incredible opportunity to join FBC TV. I actually applied for a position in radio that was to digitize old records into MP3 files. But when I mentioned I did video editing, they said, "Oh, why don't you join the TV team?" And how I got into video editing actually was I was browsing to the newspaper when I was in Form 2, and I saw there was a guy looking for a video editor. And back then, he was paying me $40 a video to cut highlights of Fiji Rugby 15s boys to send to overseas clubs. So you could say he was kind of like a scout for overseas clubs. And then I went to YouTube. I started to research how to learn video editing. And back then I was using a Windows XP computer, my dad's computer, and it was a software called Windows Movie Maker. And there was like so many different transitions, the star transitions and all these things, and I all threw it in there to make it, I thought it looked cool. But now as I gained experience, it was kind of corny.
For Daniel, creativity wasn't built in a classroom. It was built through curiosity, experimentation, and the belief that learning never stops.
Early on when I was in school, I was the head boy, I captained the math team, I captained the soccer team, and I always had this thinking or belief that I need to learn everything and anything that I can. So whether it be in sport or whether it be guitar, I figured that if I learn it, when I grow older, I'd have a lot of opportunities. Back then, I didn't know that saying, jack of all trades, master of none, But my saying was, no, I can be master in everything. When I joined FBC, I knew, because my dad ran a business, and I kind of had a business mindset early on from learning from my dad. So when I joined FBC, I looked at it as more of seed money to start a business. So all my pay, I started thinking early, like, okay, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now, I probably would want to be working for myself and not for someone else. So I had kept saving money, and I was eventually able to afford a DSLR, a Nikon D3200 to be specific, which was $1,500, which back then in 2014 was quite a good chunk of money. But I eventually saved up and was able to afford it, and then it built up from there. I actually thought about it in 2020, just before COVID. I was contemplating resigning from my full-time position at FBC, but then COVID happened. And everything shut down. You know, there were no more weddings, so I couldn't book weddings. So I continued with FBC for 2 more years. And then in 2022 March, I decided to resign after I had taken a lot of bookings for weddings from the previous year for next year.
But leaving stability behind wasn't easy. While working full-time television shifts, Daniel was quietly building his dream after hours.
So the funny thing is, while I was working at FBC, I had also been doing shoots on my days off, which people did not see because it was my day off and I took cameras out. I shot weddings, I shot a couple documentaries. The hard thing about it though is I had to juggle full-time work with also my side work, my passion. It was quite difficult because sometimes at FBC we'd start our shifts at 4 a.m. and we'd finish at midday, and then after midday I'd book clients from 2 p.m. So I'd also go and do their shoots, and then I have to edit all of that while juggling my full-time work. So sometimes I'd only get like 3 to 4 hours of sleep and then start work again at FBC with my full-time job. So, you know, being an entrepreneur, it's quite difficult, but now looking back at it, I'd say putting in the hard yards and working hard towards your goal really pays off.
Every entrepreneur remembers the moment they bet on themselves. For Daniel, it wasn't one giant leap. It was years of sacrifice, learning, and preparation. And with nothing more than determination, internet tutorials, and a vision for something bigger, Lighthouse Cinema was born. Starting a business is one thing. Convincing people to trust your vision is another. As Lighthouse Cinema entered a competitive creative industry, Daniel knew he needed more than talent to stand out. He needed stories, real stories, human stories.
When I left FBC, it was quite difficult, and I knew I needed to do something to put myself out there. And one day I was sitting in the bus stand and I was looking at the peanut sellers. And then I thought, man, nobody actually knows their story and where they come from. So I thought, with all my background in shooting stories for news and editing news, I thought, hey, why don't I do something and interview them and ask them about their life and their journey. And in 2022, in March, when I resigned, and then the month later in April, I got the courage, I built up the courage to ask one peanut seller there. I was like, hey, who's the longest peanut seller here in the Suva bus stand? And he said, oh, come, let me show you. And I was actually nervous because I'm an introvert, and to ask someone like that, I had to build up a lot of courage. So eventually we went to this guy called Mosam Ali, who's actually been selling since 1972 or 62. And I did that documentary, and I actually won an award for that documentary called the Rarama Film Awards, where I won the People's Choice Awards for Best Documentary.
My name is Mosam Ali, and I'm selling peanut from 1962 until today. I can't promise you tomorrow.
So early on, I only offered photography. Given I was also working full-time, I needed to push out content more quickly. And taking on video work, it takes a lot of time to edit compared to photos. So early on, for like the first 5 years, I only offered photos in my services. So now I actually really push on the documentary side of things, given I have a lot of experience in my time at FBC as a news cameraman. So we went out and we shot a lot of news pieces at night and early in the mornings. So I just shifted that focus from there into my business now full time. I think what makes my brand stand out is really kinda, may I say, like a business ethics, in a sense that if I take on a job, I really make sure that I can perform to it, and I'm not just running after money, because sometimes when we chase money, you can actually harm your business because of you might not be able to complete the job or have enough time to juggle a lot of jobs. So if you mess up somewhere, somebody's gonna know that you've messed up, and then your clientele will only shrink from there.
That same mindset eventually opened doors to some of Fiji's biggest productions, including one of the nation's largest sporting events.
So this year and last year, I had an incredible opportunity to shoot highlight videos on behalf of Coca-Cola, and it was an incredible opportunity to showcase my skills, given that I had shot the Coca-Cola games since 2015 with the Fijian Broadcasting Corporation, and during my time at FBC, we only covered certain angles. But this time I was free to move around with my camera and get the crowd, get the atmosphere, and it felt quite different from being on the ground compared to in the control room. So during the Coca-Cola event this year, my main focus was to capture the passion that the athletes portray. A lot of them go through weeks and weeks of training, and I really wanted to capture that part on video because it's not the usual angle that the broadcasters show. The behind the scenes when they're warming up or when they say their prayer before coming out on the track. So that's one part I really wanted to portray. But also the struggles that schools have to reach Suva. They travel quite far from Kandavu, from Rotuma, to come all the way to Suva to compete in the games. One of the things that I realized early on, and not only for the Coca-Cola games, but for shooting in general, is that poor preparation prevents you from being able to capture good images. So before every shoot, I list down shot lists on what I want to capture, and then I check it off one by one on my phone and to make sure that I get all those angles that I need to make a good video. And sometimes a lot of videographers just take the camera, they go out and they start shooting without a plan, and that actually could harm them in a way that they might not capture everything that they need to capture. Yeah, so preparing for a shoot is always something I hold very highly, because as a one-man band and as someone that does this full-time, you can't let your poor planning affect your clients, because Fiji is so small. So one mistake actually is I didn't sit down with a couple in planning their wedding and what they wanted. I thought I knew what they wanted, but then after I gave them the images and photos, they were like, oh, we wish you would have captured this angle or did this differently. And so now, before every wedding, I try to meet the couple and ask them what they want us to capture, rather than me thinking that they would like what I give. Regardless of my experience and how long I've been in the industry, I always try and ask clients on what they want out of the video. But not only that, I also give them advice on my side of things and what I think would help them. But then at the end of the day, if it's not aligned to their vision, I just shoot accordingly to what they want.
For Daniel, success was never about flashy cameras or viral videos. It was about preparation, consistency, and understanding that every client story deserves it. From local newsrooms to international football broadcasts, Daniel's journey has now expanded far beyond Fiji. But even with global opportunities, the mission remains the same: to keep learning, keep growing, and keep telling meaningful stories.
Right, so early on at FBC, I started when I was 19 years old, back in 2014. And one thing I learned early on is that you need to show initiative wherever you work, whether it be in business or in working for someone else. But that is often what separates a good employee from a stagnant one or non-performing one, so to say. So during my time at FBC, I was there for about a year, and then they had asked me to do my director training, to switch for studio shows and also for live news. And I think that really is where my passion for stories grew, when we used to go out and shoot stories for news. Not only that, but being my role as a studio director at FBC was ensuring the quality of footage that went on air. One thing that we had to do was go in 3 hours before news went on air and check all the stories, check the audio levels, check the footage matches with what the reporter is saying. And now transitioning into my business, I felt that really helped me a lot, because now when I shoot videos and I shoot photos, I try to make it as good as possible, so that it matches to what is said in a documentary. And it's not like, we're talking about a red car and then you show a motorbike. So that doesn't make sense. So I try to get the shots that's needed. But transitioning into OFC, which stands for Oceania Football. It's like the Oceania arm of FIFA in the Pacific. In 2022, I had an incredible opportunity to be a cameraman. That was straight after COVID. So OFC had held their first event in 2 years at the ANZ Stadium at that time in Suva. And I was on one of the sideline cameras. And then a month later, the producer found out that I used to direct at FBC, and they said, "Hey, why don't you direct the next tournament," which was held in Ba. That was the Under-17 Men's Championship. And I was nervous because at FBC, I actually used to only direct studio shows. I had directed football once. That was a friendly match between Solomon Islands and Fiji in Lautoka. But I learned a lot from that, and I always had that at the back of my mind. But now moving on to an international level and being hired as a broadcast director for Oceania Football, there was a lot of pressure because there were more eyes watching. And I felt like, man, what if I don't perform? What if I do this wrongly or do this? There's always that nervousness. But coming back to what I said earlier, your preparation, your mental preparation into the role really helps a lot. When I was approached to be a broadcast director for OFC, I definitely was nervous, and I was thinking, hey, maybe I shouldn't do this because I might not perform. But then on the other hand, even at FBC, while I was still there, I had been asked to be a studio director, and I was nervous. And as opportunities come, I think you should be able, like everyone should be able to take it on and see if it works for you. We never know what we can do unless we just say yes. And opportunities might be built out of saying yes. So I'd recommend people just trying things that they may not be comfortable with, and seeing where that takes them. And over now, this is my 4th year being a broadcast director for OFC. I've gone to so many different countries in the Pacific, about 8 or 9 countries. That opportunity would never arise if I had not said yes back in 2022.
Those international experience didn't just sharpen Daniel's technical skills, they reshaped his mindset.
So working for Oceania Football, we interact with a lot of people from New Zealand, and you see their work ethic, and you be like, man, I need to upskill myself. I need to perform better and be able to communicate with them and be able to learn from them as well. So working internationally has really helped me a lot in my business and how I treat every day moving forward. For Lighthouse Cinema, I see my business in the next 5 years growing to a larger scale where I am able to shoot higher end productions. Like, I've always admired those Netflix documentaries, and I feel that I'm going towards that kind of style, that I can take on much more higher end clients. And now the next thing is just for me to upskill myself, shooting better, shooting different angles and learning more about videography. My message to creatives and to people who want to come into this field is that, again, I'm gonna reiterate the importance of preparation. One thing is preparation, another thing is only accepting jobs that you know you're capable of executing. You wouldn't want to overpromise and underdeliver. I usually have a saying of underpromising and over-delivering, so that the client's expectations are not that high, but where you can perform in a far more exceeding level. My message, to people who want to start their business is just jumping in the deep end and finding out everything that you can about the business. Usually a good business, or not really a good business, but a sustainable business, comes from you showing up every day, you putting in the hard work, and no matter... there was this saying that we usually use in television that, even if the house is, the room you're in is burning, the show must go on. So I use that same aspect in my businesses. Whether you're having a bad day or you may not feel like shooting, you still owe it to your clients to show up and to put out good work for them. So pick yourself up, wash your face, and carry on.
From a teenager learning video editing on YouTube to directing international broadcasts across the Pacific, Daniel Veitata's story is proof that passion, preparation, and persistence can build something extraordinary. As Young Entrepreneurs closes its first season, one message remains clear: success doesn't happen overnight. It's built quietly through sacrifice, consistency, and the courage to keep showing up. This has been Young Entrepreneurs.
This program is brought to you by the Public